Where'd you need me?
Dagda is a 5-star Brawler guard available for free by completing Chapter 11, and a member of Siege's Glasgow gang. She's a hybrid lane holder and elite killer who's designed to be set down right at the start of the stage and to be useful right through to the very end. She's best deployed early on, does lots of damage, and gets stronger the more enemies she fights. Dagda has a very low deployment point cost, very high base stats, and high attack speed typical of brawlers, at the drawback of only one block. Dagda has 2 talents. The first, Gang Spirit, gives her a chance to increase the damage of her next attack. This starts out as a small damage boost, but increases for every enemy defeated nearby to Dagda, or if you have them on the field, any other member of the Glasgow gang. At max stats in Elite 2, Dagda's crits deal an insane 240% of her attack as damage, which lets her punch through even some of the most tanky enemies in the game. Her second talent, Knight's Honor, is only active in Chapter 11. It gives her some extra HP and makes Dagda heal herself whenever she does damage. The skill's counter technique is amazing on paper, but not quite as great in practice. The skill causes Dagda to take significantly reduced physical damage when hit and respond with a buffed attack. Due to Dagda's insanely high attack speed as a brawler, the skill's more reliable if you run her with Blemishine, who lets units with defensive skills judge skill points by attacking. But since it's a defensive skill, Dagda only having one block means enemies leak more. Not to mention the counterattack won't work against ranged units. Her skill 2, Search and Destroy, is an excellent all-around DPS skill that gives Dagda an attack buff, increases her chance to crit, and makes all of her attacks hit twice. The skill has solid uptime and generally makes her do at least 3 times her normal damage for the duration, tearing through waves of weak enemies like Sandpaper, and even letting her reliably take down elite armored enemies if she's been on the field long enough to charge up her first talent. For masteries, her S1 generally isn't worth it since it's a defensive skill on an offensive DPS unit. Her S2, on the other hand, gets a higher proc rate, a bit better of an attack buff, and better SP costs. If you like using Dagda, it's definitely worthwhile. She also gets noticeably stronger with a few extra levels, so if you can, it might be worth sending a bit more XP her way. Dagda has very high base stats, making her well suited for direct, drawn-out confrontations due to her scaling damage and amazing second skill. While her one block can be an issue for maps and stages with dense enemy groupings, her DPS is high enough that she can often solo lanes anyway. And while usually brawlers can't even scratch armored enemies, she has no such problem. Though if she gets stuck on an enemy with high HP or defense while her skill's charging, you'll generally have to wait for it to be back up. And while Dagda can hold lanes incredibly well for a one block, there'll still be moments where an enemy slips through. A lot of the time she's better served weakening a wave or taking out a strong enemy rather than soloing the whole lane. But Dagda does have one major issue. You unlock Dagda by clearing Chapter 11 Stage 15. 15 of 20. 24 in total if you include the hard mode stages. And while she thrives a lot in the earlier stages in Chapter 11, she doesn't do nearly as well in the later ones. Stage 19 is a trial stage with a fixed roster, and Stage 20 is comprised almost entirely out of enemies with very high armor and HP, as well as a boss who hits hard enough that even with her talent's 20% HP buff at max level, she can barely survive one attack. Her second talent's healing scales off of how much damage she deals, and a lot of the enemies in Chapter 11 have very high defense. Even the boss, who does heavy physical damage, does so over multiple hits, rendering her first skill effectively useless. None of this takes away from Dagda being a very strong unit. She just feels weaker by comparison to herself, and this can give a poor first impression to anyone who uses her right after unlocking her, especially since one of her key talents only activates in Chapter 11. In summary, Dagda's a tanky, high-damage brawler with excellent DPS that can deal with much more dangerous waves and enemies than her one block might imply. While she has a bit of trouble at low levels, she does much better against high defense than most physical units, and has good uptime and a ramping buff that lets her stay effective from start to finish. Her second talent, only available in Chapter 11, is an insanely high self-heal, unless she's up against enemies with high armor, where she'll usually still need support. If you also use another member of the Glasgow gang like Siege, it's usually beneficial to put them in a different lane than Dagda, so that her first talent can charge better. Other than that, Dagda wants to be as close to the front as you can get her.
Is that it?
Despite having a Cockney accent, Dagda is a knight, and the only surviving member of her order. Dagda is the second welfare 5-star Victorian punk yellow-eyed female cat brawler with a 5-letter codename ending in the letter A, who's a member of Siege's gang that specializes in armor killing. Every other brawler has access to dodge. In Flint's case, this is by decreasing her block to 0.